Representative made an interesting statement that the unaccompanied minor wants to be able to get his records just like the student sitting next to him. But through you, Mr. Speaker, unless the student sitting next to him is also an unaccompanied minor, that student cannot get his or her own medical records or educational records. Those records must be obtained by a parent or guardian. Is that true? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fleischman.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. Sort of. I mean, the way it works is that those educational records are supposed to go to the parents. In a lot of school systems, the records, say the child's performance record academically and in their special classes like PE and music and so forth, are folded and put into an envelope that's addressed to the parent and handed to the child. And the child gets to bring them home to the parent. The parent then opens them and shares them with the child. In other districts, they're mailed out. In most typical families, whatever the mechanism that's used for the school system to get the educational record to the parents or guardians, the parents or guardians, once they've reviewed them, tend to sit down with their children and discuss them, and then discuss them further in a parent-teacher conference. So my colleague's initial point is well taken. No child directly is typically handed their educational record. But in a normal Connecticut family situation where a child is living at home, they do indeed get to see their records sitting down with their parents. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Dubitzky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that answer, but that answer is really only geared towards school records. This bill covers what, in my view, is considerably more than that. It includes medical or similar records. So my question is to the proponent, what is a similar record and where is the limit? What is the extent of the records that such person can obtain? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fleischman.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. So this measure came before us because children in this situation often have to move from one school system to another. And to successfully transfer from one district to another, they have to provide records from their last district to their next district. And most districts require, for example, that a student have a series of immunizations in order to attend school. If that record of immunizations is resident in one school system, the child would be able to get those records and give them to the next school system. That is the spirit of the measure before us. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dubitzky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, this includes documents that are maintained by a local or regional board of education. Is there a reason why the State Board of Education is specifically excluded from this? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fleischman.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. The State Board of Education does not hold many student records. There is an exception, of course, which is records for children attending the technical high school system. So it's an interesting point. To my knowledge, the advocates who brought this before us have faced this problem in dealing with local and regional boards of ed and hadn't encountered it with the State Board of Education. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dubitzky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, this is one of the sort of my pet peeves, is that we, in the legislature, draft very specific bills sometimes that are not really of general applicability. We carve out little exceptions based on the problems that our constituents have, as opposed to looking at overall how a bill will apply across the state. And I'd also like to associate myself with the comments of Representative Candelora. And essentially, we have or should have a policy, and I believe we do have a policy in state law, that encourages and even requires that the state take certain actions when a youth who is homeless and has no parents or guardians is basically wandering the streets. The state of Connecticut, our current laws encourage and even mandate that the state take action in that instance and bring that unaccompanied youth into the system. Make sure that any needs they have, any services that they need are addressed. Make sure that there is somebody who is of legal age and responsible that can make decisions that we all know that children are not capable of making. We also have a system of emancipation where a child who believes they have that capacity to make those decisions on their own and has a problem with their current parent and guardian can become emancipated, can go to the courts and say, I need to be able to make these decisions on my own. And what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is it circumvents both of those policies. And it basically says that we're going to make it easier for a child who has no home and has no parent or guardian, we're going to make it easier for them to stay homeless and stay guardianless. By giving them access to these documents, we're making it that much easier for them to do these things without a parent or guardian. It essentially, it's one step towards de facto emancipation and one step away from bringing them into the system. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I will be opposing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.